know that where ECOWAS is coming from. From the Lagos Treaty of 28 May 1975. How did it come about? Remember that there were many of the countries in West Africa were okay. Some of them were led by the military. For instance, Nigeria, which led that the process, was under a military regime of General Yakubu Gowon. In even some countries that started, that eventually went into, soldiers changing their agbada. For instance, in Lomé, Togo, where you had Yadema. Yadema was also a soldier, a general, if you remember. Then on and on, Ghana was under the military, and so on and so forth. So is it what is it? Liberia. Liberia was under the military. Sierra Leone had series of coups, and then from one military to the other, and so on and so forth. It's only perhaps the Senegal or Cape Verde, that have never really tested military regime or military coups. That is to tell you that this is where ECOWAS was coming from, the evolution. From these people, from the military chaps, who now thought that it was not, when the world also, let us look at the emerging trend from 1990s, and then Benin was also Colonel Kerekou, if you remember him. That they were the first ones that started this movement to multi-party democracy. Okay, where they went through what you call constitutional assembly or constituent assembly or whatever you call it, to now look at the constitution and then make allowance for, because it used to be one-party states in many of them. For those who were running, they have done the transition. But in other places, it was military dictatorship. But it was in Benin, where the military now held that assembly and decided to infuse or inject into their constitution one provision that stands till today, which should is exemplary, that nobody, and it's from experience, because Kerekou, after becoming military, won an election and then continued. But they were saying now that after 2 terms, nobody in their lifetime, and mark the word, lifetime, can become president of Benin Republic for a 3rd term. So it is written there. You may tell me that what is written is different from what even now that they are changing the constitutions. But it's there that nobody in their lifetime should be able to extend their position, whether consecutively or after a gap for 3rd term. That is why, I think that is one of the reasons President Talon, who is there now, he's not doing, he has said he's not doing a 3rd term, even though he is also preparing ground to make sure that maybe the person that is his ally will take over. Well, no problem with that, because we have also seen where godfatherism has backfired. When you manage to put somebody there, once they get to office, they now see that power is a different thing. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. They may now disagree with their godfather. So that is one thing. So what am I saying? That ECOWAS, having seen the founding fathers, now seeing the benefit of having, multi-party governance, and then democracy, or whatever you want to call it, but not military, at least transitioning from the military to what now became from the 1990s and whatever, because it was blowing the air of democracy, the wave of democracy was blowing through Africa, and they caught on with West Africa or the ECOWAS region. So when they now set it up, so not long before that, in fact, not up to 10 years, it was 1975. By 1989, there was the crisis in Liberia. Okay, under Master Sergeant Doe has taken over power. He was ruling, and then Charles Taylor, one of the rebel leaders, now called the BBC on Christmas Eve to say he was going to march on to Monrovia to sack Doe. Then there was no much internet or telephone, no mobile phone, but there was the satellite phone, which President Taylor used to, to the greatest advantage, and was calling BBC every now and then. So at times you may say that some people call the Liberian War a BBC war, because Taylor will use them, call them at any time to tell them what he was doing. ECOWAS was now then doing catch-up. That was when ECOWAS now took a very revolutionary decision to, and it was in Gambia, where ruled them by Jawara, Dauda Jawara. So where the decision was taken to set up what you now call the ECOWAS ceasefire monitoring group, ECOMOG, to now send the group to Liberia to go and make sure that a government that was there was saved. That is the government of President Doe. Doe took over in a coup, but managed to hold the election. But then the elections were not as many people did not look at those elections, because it was just, they were flawed. But of course, he was still an elected president. Then Taylor said he was going to remove him. Taylor moved from Cote d'Ivoire, and then after training in Libya and so on. And then he was now trying to, he couldn't get there because ECOMOG then intervened in August of 1990. He started his rebellion that turned into a war in December 1989, and then ECOMOG moved in August of 1990. Okay, and one was part of it because as a journalist, we were embedded. There were 10 of us, Nigerian journalists. Even then, two of our colleagues were missing, and later were confirmed to have died. I think were killed by Taylor. Taylor eventually came to apologize, but the family even brought money, but the families rejected that money because he just killed them. To tell you how dangerous and then deadly that Taylor was attacking, because he felt that Babangida, who was then the military ruler, it was said that Babangida was trying to save his friend Samuel Doe, by getting the ECOMOG together. There were Ghana, Nigeria, and a few other countries that contributed the first troops that now went from Sierra Leone, the harbor there. They went by sea to the Monrovia free port to go, and thanks to somebody another rebel leader, Prince Johnson, who broke away from Taylor, that allowed ECOMOG to land, because Taylor will not allow ECOMOG to land. So then there began the peace, so many peace agreements. In fact, they had up to 13. It was the 13th one that Taylor respected to enable an election to be held in 1997, which more or less he won, because the agreement or original agreement there was, well, this man caused this problem, let him come and fix it, and so on and so forth. So that is how ECOWAS came into using not just preventive diplomacy, but intervention militarily. No region of Africa. Africa has 8 regional economic communities. It was the ECOWAS that started that and was able to, stop these wars. Because after Liberia, Sierra Leone became another war zone, and ECOMOG also now moved from Liberia to Sierra Leone to settle all this. Then you will say, what was there? How did the issue of governance now come in? It was through so many instruments. There was the Treaty of 19, after the Lagos Treaty that set it up, in 1983, there was a review, another to review the treaty, that amended some of the things they wanted to amend. And then in 1999, ECOWAS now came up with what you call the protocol, because they now thought that they were set up, let me not forget that, originally to foster economic development, okay? But because they were now challenged by these peace and security issues, they now have to inject peace and security into their protocol. And that is why you find in many of the protocols, you find the ways of 1999, 2001, 2010, and all that, that talks about peace and security and democracy and good governance. They now brought all these things together to make sure that it was not only, and also take into account the fact that originally the idea was to foster economic integration and bring regional, a way that the citizens will, when they started, I think they must have been around either 200 to 300 million. Now the region of, they started with eventually 16 states. In 2000, Mauritania left, and now is also asking, seeking to return. But from 2020, another wave of military rule returned from Mali. Then from Mali, it went to Guinea, from Guinea to where again? Burkina Faso, and then lastly, Niger. So Guinea is still following the transition program. But the three others, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, pulled out. They said they have become the alliance of Sahel states, because they felt that when ECOWAS slammed some sanctions on them, they felt it was too harsh, and that ECOWAS did not help them when they were fighting insurgencies. Forgetting that insurgency has come across, particularly with the killing, assassination of Muammar Gaddafi in 2011, the Sahel became an epicenter of all these secessionists, not secessionist, insurrection. All these armed groups now had a space that you call ungoverned space. And so that is what has happened. ECOWAS has now become 12 states, from 16 to 12, and then 16 to 15 from 16 to 12. And there are still efforts in trying to get this together. But about fostering democracy, there have been efforts through, you mentioned it here, ECOWAS supports its members. That is why you have at the Political Affairs, Peace and Security Directorate, there is the election assistance division, where that coordinates how members who are holding elections, major elections, can be assisted through security, observation, and then making recommendation, and then doing fact-finding missions to make sure that the elements are there to foster democratic principles. Under this, ECOWAS has had to suspend some of its member states. Guinea is one of them, Niger is one of them, Cote d'Ivoire is one of them. Whenever there is a coup, military coup, ECOWAS usually takes a position. One, to suspend the member, and then work with the member to come back from military to civilian constitutional order. Okay, so they have always done that. But in the case of once they now became, when these 4 countries were involved, particularly with Niger, I think ECOWAS managed the situation by not following its own rules. And that was why it was that part of that mismanagement and that mistake that led to this, the high-handed, the way it was handled. Even Nigeria had to cut off electricity supply from Niger, which was not part of the ECOWAS. It was a bilateral arrangement. But when Nigeria did that, these other countries saw it that the big brother in the region was behaving as if he did not want, that it was an enemy action. And when Nigeria now said it was going to go to Niger to use a military, when the ECOWAS, not Nigeria, decided, but it was under President Ahmed Tinubu, who had just taken over as the chairman of the authorities. That was when it happened. And then they saw it that the big brother was not behaving like one, but being antagonistic, and was even contemplating going to evade an ECOWAS member, which I think they eventually pulled back, but I think it was too late. These countries, I think their position too, today they are talking about Pan-Africanism and all that, but you will see it, eventually they will come back. But before they do, the damage would have been done. You can see what is happening in Mali today. There is no fuel, and then Mali, Bamako, for instance, every place has been turned into, nobody can move. Children cannot go to school. Workers cannot go to work because jihadists had now struck, and they are threatening to take over government in Mali. To tell you that perhaps it's easier to organize a coup, but running a government is another kettle of fish. The other thing is that there appears to be on the principle of unconstitutional change of government. It appears, although the text has provisions for identifying some of the things that amount to unconstitutional change, like changing the constitution, rigging election, oppression and suppression of the people, not allowing press freedom or human rights. These are not, when this happened under the civilians, nothing appears. ECOWAS does not, ECOWAS is no longer rising up. It's only when there is a military coup. And this is not to justify military coup, but those who are saying, why one rule for military coup makers and another one for civilian politicians who are also doing, carrying out what some people will call constitutional coups and electoral coups. So it is that inconsistency, that contradiction that has put ECOWAS where it is, and then now challenging its authority, its competence, and its integrity and legitimacy in fighting for democracy in the region. So let me stop here.